It doesn't matter whether you're circumcised or uncircumcised. That's his whole point. The seal of righteousness of faith while he was uncircumcised.
Yeah. This is Ask Dr. E, where Dr. Michael Easley answers your biblical or theological questions in 10 minutes or less. Today's question comes from Sherry. She writes, "Hi, Dr. E. Thank you for being available to answer questions. My question is from Romans 4:10-12. If Abraham's righteousness was based on faith and not circumcision, how might women in Abraham's time have expressed their covenant relationship with God, given that they did not receive circumcision?"
This is an interesting question.
Yeah.
One that I would never have thought of, left alone for 100 years.
Now I got to get to Romans.
I got the passage, Romans 4, but you can turn in your biblical Bible, as Dave Gibson says. I'm reading my biblical Bible. He always says he's a funny guy. Anyway, sorry for the digression. Okay, let's talk about this. Romans chapter 4, verse 9 is a citation of Genesis 15:6. Genesis 15:6 says, "Then he believed in the Lord, and he, God, reckoned it to him as righteousness."
Yes.
So the point of this Abrahamic covenant is that Abram believes God, and that's what saves him.
Yes.
You believed me, I reckoned you as righteousness, God is saying, okay? And this really is a foundation for all of our faith. Now, when Paul refers to this, he's talking about Abraham's faith, and then he talks about circumcision as a sign of this covenant.
Okay.
So let me read Romans 4:10-12. Or how about you read it?
Okay.
Romans 4:10-12.
This is in the NASB. "How then was it credited? While he was circumcised or uncircumcised? Not while circumcised, but while uncircumcised. And he received the sign of circumcision as a seal of the righteousness of the faith which he had while uncircumcised." How many times am I going to say circumcised? "So that he might be the father of all who believe without being circumcised, that righteousness might be credited to them. And the father of circumcision to those who not only are of the circumcision, but who also follow in the steps of the faith of our father Abraham, which he had while uncircumcised."
Now, you talk about reading it in repetition, and that's very important because what Paul's telling the Roman believers, because you got this tension about, and it's a tension in the New Testament, especially in Acts, how much Judaism do you have to understand and acknowledge to be a Christian?
How Jewish do you have to be a Christian?
And that's basically the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15. Now, Abraham is 99 years old when he's circumcised. He wasn't circumcised when Isaac or Ishmael was born. He's circumcised at 99 years of age when Ishmael is 17. So back to what I was mentioning in an earlier question we got, the Abrahamic covenant was released in, let's say, an abbreviated form. Chapter 12, chapter 15, 17, and 19 of Genesis, it's expanded. So Genesis 17 is when God says, circumcise yourself, circumcise your son, and circumcise all the men in your household, because that was a sign of the covenant.
Right.
Not at Genesis 12, but Genesis 17. The names are changed from Abram to Abraham and Sarai to Sarah. Abram to Abraham is the more interesting one because it's an exalted father, Abram is a father of multitudes, Abraham.
Wow.
Or a father of nations. So the circumcision is a covenant to Abraham, the man. And it's very interesting when you read that passage, it's my covenant, it's to you, Abraham, not to you and Sarai. Not to you and Sarah. And I have to extrapolate and say the seed of Abraham, of course, is going to be the messianic seed later on. And so that's why the covenant was through Abram the man. Secondly, the more, let's say, symbolic reason of circumcision was that the men of Israel will be set apart.
Okay.
You're being cut, you're being set apart, and that's an allusion to the covenant. Because the covenant means to cut a covenant. So when God has Abraham cut all the animals, and he walks through it, it's cutting a covenant. It's a bad illustration, but if you ever watch old Westerns, when the John Wayne and the Indian cut their hand and shake each other's hands, the blood covenant means not just for brothers. If you don't keep your covenant, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
If I don't keep the covenant, you can kill me. And that's exactly what the covenant meant. It was to cut a covenant. So this covenant from God is, I'm going to keep the covenant.
Yeah.
And the sign of that is your circumcision, that you're set apart as part of that covenant-keeping promise. There was no need for the woman to do that. She's a participant, she's an observer, but the seed comes through Abraham.
So would you say women aren't part of the Abrahamic covenant?
Not at all.
It really is about the male seed, the male
sign
line.
was, the sign of the covenant was specifically for the man. And
so obviously women, it could be, they could be credited as righteous.
Oh, 100%.
Because of their belief in Yahweh, because of...
And that's his point in Romans. And you go back and forth. It doesn't matter whether you're circumcised or uncircumcised. That's his whole point. The seal of righteousness of faith while he was uncircumcised.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember, we already talked about that. He was reckoned to God as righteous before Genesis 17 when he undergoes circumcision. So this is a sign and a commemoration. And later in Judaism, of course, that was huge. On the 8th day to circumcise the boy. Now, there were other cultures that perverted this, both before and after Abraham, with men and women. But in the Jewish line, the women were credited just like Gentiles were credited. And remember Timothy? Paul has Timothy circumcised.
Right.
He had a Greek father and a Jewish mother. And Paul thought, this might be a problem going.
Get it done.
Yeah, going. And the son's like, go ahead.
Make your life a little easier.
And that was controversial.
Right.
Even then. Because this whole debate, are you really of Israel?
Yeah.
And if you weren't circumcised on the 8th day and you were a Jew, then you're not Israel.
Yeah.
And that's why Paul goes, and Paul's a Jewish Jew, right?
Right.
Hebrew of Hebrews.
Now, it was Moses, right, who when he's going, he hasn't gone to Pharaoh yet in the desert, and God gets angry with him and he's going to kill him.
Wife,
the text says, and his wife is like, I will circumcise you and the Lord will not kill you.
That's a long ass talk to read for another time.
Yeah. I just thought I'd just throw it in there,
I will say this. Bruce Waltke spent like an hour and a half message trying to explain that passage one time.
I like that. That gives me...
There are some passages
that's like, you know what? We just don't need to... We don't need to know. We don't need to get it. I don't know why. It's in
but
here.
It sure is interesting, right?
Sure is interesting. All right. Well, if you've got a question for Dr. E, he may say... I don't know, and listen to Bruce Waltke for an hour and a half, and he doesn't know, frankly. I'm just kidding. Call us, text us, email us. The info is in your show notes. We'll see you next week.